Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Ready to explore something a bit unnerving today?
I'm ready.
We're diving deep into how China's using, well, cybersecurity vulnerabilities kind of like a strategic tool.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating and honestly concerning trend.
Yeah, and our main source for all this is a report. It's called China, Vulnerabilities as a Strategic Resource.
Right, from Intrinsic.
Yep, a cybersecurity company. And this was published pretty recently, just last month, actually, October 2024. We're going to break down how China's getting more aggressive with cybersecurity.
It's definitely making waves globally.
And it impacts everyone, not just us tech folks.
Definitely. It's something everyone needs to be aware of.
So where do we even start with this?
Well, I think it's fascinating how China's built this system kind of in layers. Most people have heard of the Great Firewall.
Right, yeah.
Been around forever, it seems, controlling internet access in China since 1998.
It's been a while.
But things changed in 2017 with the Intelligence Act. The firewall became way more powerful, probably even able to do man-in-the-middle attacks now.
Wow. And this law, it forces Chinese citizens to work with intelligence agencies, right?
Yeah, citizens aid organizations have to cooperate.
It's not just blocking websites anymore. They're actively using everyone for cybersecurity.
You could almost call it deputizing the entire population.
It shows how serious they are about national security. I mean, using their own people like this, that's...
It's definitely unusual. And there's more. The 2017 cybersecurity law, that adds another level of control focusing on data.
data security, right?
Yeah. And specifically how data moves across borders.
And they don't mess around with enforcing this. The report even mentions a supermarket chain in Nanchang fined for a data breach.
Yeah, a supermarket.
Seems a bit much, doesn't it? A supermarket.
Well, their systems got hacked and then used to launch DDoS attacks.
Oh, wow.
Articles 21 and 25 of that cybersecurity law, those are the key ones. Companies in China, they face huge fines if they don't prevent breaches or report them right away.
Makes that supermarket incident seem like a warning to everyone else.
Exactly, like they're making an example.
But all this strictness, doesn't that make things hard for businesses operating in China? I know the report mentioned the wording in the law being vague, especially around the term network operators.
It is vague, and I think that's deliberate. Gives the Chinese government a lot of power to interpret the rules however they want. And then in 2021, the RMSV comes into play, making it even more clear.
The RMSV, the Regulation on the Management of Network Product Security Vulnerabilities. Okay, break that down for us. What does it actually do? Who's it aimed at?
Imagine a huge net, right? That's what China's using to catch any vulnerability found within its borders. RMSV targets hardware companies, software companies, even security researchers, anyone in China.
So if you're finding vulnerabilities, you're on their radar. And that vague network operator definition is still there, so they have a ton of control. And here's the kicker. The RMSV straight up bans collecting, selling, or telling anyone about vulnerabilities that could be dangerous to their systems.
That's right. If companies find a vulnerability, they have to report it directly to the government,
To a specific database.
called the CNNVD, and they have to keep records of these vulnerabilities for 6 months. Totally different from the open disclosure policies you see in other places.
It's interesting, though, because the report mentioned bug bounty programs. Doesn't that seem like a contradiction?
It does seem that way.
Yeah.
They're encouraging these programs, BUT. The government wants control over all the info. They're basically saying, find the bugs, but tell us first.
Okay, I see. So it's all about control. So tell us more about this CNNVD. Is it just another vulnerability database?
Well, there's actually 2 Chinese vulnerability databases. CNNVD, which they claim is non-governmental, and then the CNNVD, which is run by CNISEC, a government entity. And they're believed to be closely linked to the Ministry of State Security, which is a major intelligence agency in China.
Wait, so their intelligence agency might be running this database?
Potentially, yeah. Makes you wonder what they're doing with all that information.
That's concerning, to say the least.
For people at Intrinsic, they did an experiment where they submitted a fake vulnerability to the CNNVD. What they found is pretty revealing.
What'd they find?
The CNNVD, they asked for a proof of concept, not just a description. They wanted actual code that proved the vulnerability existed.
So they're not just gathering information, they're collecting working exploits. That's alarming.
And get this, they offer rewards based on how good the information is. So China's basically paying people to give them potentially weaponizable stuff. It's like crowdsourcing exploits.
Wow. Makes you think, is the CNNVD just a database, or is it something much bigger?
Good question. It's a disturbing thought for sure.
Yeah.
Like they're building a whole arsenal of vulnerabilities.
And what about the data itself? Does the report say anything about what happens to all that info?
They did an analysis of the data from both the CNBD and CNNVD, and they found some patterns that are pretty interesting. After the RMSV, submissions to the CNVD went way down.
Makes sense.
People probably started reporting to the CNNVD instead. But getting access to that data, it wasn't easy.
What do you mean?
Lots of 404 errors. IP blocking, too. It seems like they're hiding the data on purpose.
Not very transparent, are they?
Not at all. Oh, and here's something else. Their website gets backed up every single day, even for data that's years old.
Wow, so they really care about this data.
They definitely do. Like, it's super valuable to them.
Valuable enough to maybe weaponize.
The report specifically talks about CVE 2024-2014-62, a big vulnerability in Fortinet products. This vulnerability was reported to the U.S. National Vulnerability Database right away, but it took a while to show up on the CNNVD. When it finally did, the date seemed to be changed, like it was backdated.
So they deliberately delayed it to give Chinese actors an advantage.
It's definitely possible it was just one incident, but it raises some important questions. Is China holding back this information strategically?
Right. Is it just to give them an edge? And does the RMSV actually have total control? Are there weaknesses?
They say in the report that the impact of the RMSV isn't the same for everyone. Different companies interpret it in different ways. Bigger corporations, they probably have the resources to avoid disclosing everything.
So a double standard. They force smaller companies to follow the rules strictly, but bigger ones get a pass.
That's what it looks like. They might fix the vulnerabilities without reporting them, or give incomplete information to the CNNVD. The Chinese government might be hesitant to punish big companies because they're so important to the economy.
Makes you wonder who really has the power online. If they can force companies to just hand over these vulnerabilities, what does that mean for everyone else?
It's complicated for sure. The report also talks about a book from 2023 called General Secretary Xi Jinping's Introduction to Important Ideology Regarding China as a Cyber Powerhouse.
That's a mouthful. What's so special about this book?
It's not widely available, a limited circulation kind of thing, and it gives us some insight into China's strategy around cybersecurity.
Interesting.
Yeah, cybersecurity researcher named Dakota Carey. He got a hold of it and analyzed it. Chapter 5, that's the important part for us. It's all about their cybersecurity policy and how they're approaching national security.
Which makes sense with everything we've talked about so far. Cybersecurity is essential for them.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is there's this weird contradiction in their stance.
What do you mean?
They say they want to protect their citizens from online threats, but at the same time, they're engaged in cyber espionage themselves.
Sounds a bit hypocritical, doesn't it?
It definitely raises eyebrows. It's important to see the whole picture. The book also mentions China's working on reforming their cybersecurity education and training people for cyber operations.
Defensive and de-offensive, you mean?
Exactly. They're investing heavily in building their capabilities on all fronts.
Like a cyber army. Okay, this is getting more and more unsettling. I think we've covered a lot, but can we just summarize what we've learned so far?
Sure. China's cybersecurity laws, they're evolving really quickly. And national security and controlling information, those are the big priorities.
The RMSV and the CNNVD, those are key to their strategy.
But the fact that they can be weaponized, that's the scary part.
It's not just about defense anymore. It seems like they're actively trying to get an advantage online.
That's the implication. And even though the RMSV gives them a lot of control, it's not perfect. Bigger companies might be finding ways to avoid following all the rules.
This has been fascinating, but also really concerning. China's approach to cybersecurity.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Raises a lot of questions about the future of the internet, that's for sure.
That is for sure. So what do you think, where does all this leave us? What can regular people and companies do to protect themselves when things are like this?
Well, awareness is key. For one thing, just realizing that state actors can actually use vulnerabilities as weapons. That's huge.
It's not just about hackers anymore.
Exactly. This is about national interest, getting an edge over other countries, maybe even cyber warfare. Scary stuff. So what can we actually do about it? Well, basic cybersecurity practices are more important than ever.
Like strong passwords and all that?
Yep. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, always keeping your software up to date. That's the foundation. But we also have to think differently about the products and services we use.
How so?
Well, if you're using something made by a company that might be forced to share vulnerabilities with the Chinese government, that's a risk. We need to be smarter about supply chain security.
So we need to know where our technology comes from and be careful about what we choose.
Exactly. Diversifying your tech can help too. Don't just rely on things from one country or one company. Spread the risk, like you would with investments.
That's a good way to think about it. And obviously, staying informed about cybersecurity news is important.
Knowledge is power, right? This report also brings up some ethical questions, like, is it ever okay for a government to collect and maybe even exploit vulnerabilities, even for national security?
That's a tough one. Some say anything goes in cyber warfare, but others say that exploiting these weaknesses just makes the internet less secure for everyone.
It's a slippery slope. And then there's the question of trust. Can we really trust any government or company to handle this information responsibly?
Transparency is key, right? If governments and companies were open about what they're doing and why, that would help. But when you're talking about intelligence and national security, it's not that simple. It's a balancing act. Security versus transparency, national interests versus global cooperation. It's messy.
And that's why it's so important to talk about these things openly. We need to raise awareness and make those in power accountable. The future of the internet depends on it.
Exactly. Do we want a world where vulnerabilities are weapons? Or do we want a more secure, more collaborative online world? What we do today matters. But before we get too deep into that, let's bring it back to what China's doing.
Good point. We've talked about the RMSV and CNNVD, but it's important to see how all of this fits into China's overall cybersecurity strategy and their global goals.
Let's connect the dots. What are they ultimately trying to achieve?
Well, China's been pretty clear about wanting to be a global leader in technology and innovation. They put a ton of money into AI, 5G, quantum computing,
Yeah.
all that.
They want to lead the tech revolution.
Yes, and cybersecurity is crucial to that. They see it as essential for defense and as a potential weapon.
So controlling cyberspace is part of their plan for global dominance.
I think so. By controlling vulnerabilities, they can weaken their rivals, protect their own systems, and just gain a strategic edge.
So the laws, the databases, the training programs, it's all connected. They're
Mhm.
building a cyber ecosystem.
And we can't ignore that. What they're doing online isn't random. It's part of a bigger plan to get ahead on the world stage.
So how does this look in the real world? How are they using these capabilities to get what they want?
There are a few examples. First, think about intellectual property theft. China's been accused of using cyber espionage to steal secrets and tech from companies and governments in other countries.
That's been a big problem in international relations.
Absolutely. It lets them get ahead in technology, but it's not fair competition and it destroys trust. Basically, it's economic warfare.
And then there's the censorship and control issue. China uses its power online to control what people see and what they can say within its borders.
The Great Firewall is the biggest example. But they're also selling these censorship technologies to other countries, helping authoritarian regimes stay in power. They're spreading their model of control.
And we can't forget the possibility that they might use their capabilities more aggressively, like launching cyber attacks that disrupt or damage things in other countries. That's a scary thought.
It is. The lines between spying, sabotage, and actual war are getting blurry online.
So what can the rest of the world do about this? Is it a losing battle?
It's tough, but we can do things. We need to invest in our own cyber defenses, make critical infrastructure stronger, train more cybersecurity professionals, invest in new technologies. We can't fall behind.
What else?
We need to work together, share information with allies, coordinate defenses, and show a united front. There's strength in numbers.
Right. We can't let them divide and conquer. What about holding China accountable for what they're doing?
That's key. We need to call them out on their cyber espionage, human rights abuses, and their attempts to break the rules of the international system. It's about setting clear limits and consequences. But the question is, can we realistically expect them to change?
That's the million-dollar question. They talk about cybersecurity cooperation, but their actions tell a different story. We have to be realistic about their intentions and not be naive. This is a complex situation that keeps changing. We need to stay alert and engaged.
I agree. We can't just sit back and watch. The stakes are too high.
This has been a real eye-opener. Cybersecurity isn't just a technical issue anymore. It's about national security and international relations. It's going to be even more important in the future.
Absolutely. As tech keeps advancing, the cyber world is going to be a bigger and bigger battleground.
So what does the future hold? What should we be watching for?
I think we're going to see the lines between peacetime and wartime online continue to blur. Espionage, sabotage, and spreading disinformation will become even more common.
Like a constant low-level cyber conflict.
Exactly. And with artificial intelligence and automation getting better, Cyber attacks will get bigger and more complex. It could even lead to a cyber arms race. And then there's quantum computing, which could change everything. Quantum computers might be able to crack the encryption that protects our data.
That would be a game changer.
It would. We need to be ready for a world with quantum computers by developing new encryption methods and security protocols.
It's a lot to think about. Cybersecurity is not static. It keeps changing, and we need to adapt and come up with new solutions.
We need to be proactive, not reactive. Strategic, not just tactical.
Couldn't agree more. This isn't just for governments and cybersecurity experts. We all have a role to play.
Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. We need to stay informed, be careful, and be involved. This deep dive, it's shown us just how complicated things are with cybersecurity and geopolitics. It's definitely a wake-up call. It is. We can't just be passive. We all have a role in shaping the future of the internet.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive and sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. These issues are important. We need to talk about them.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey into cybersecurity and geopolitics. We hope you understand these challenges better now and why taking action is so important.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more we know about the threats out there, the better we can protect ourselves and build a more secure future.
On that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. What do you see as your role in shaping the future of cyberspace? It's a question worth thinking about, and more importantly, acting on. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware online.
It really makes you think, about who really holds the power in cyberspace.
Yeah.
We often talk about military strength, but vulnerabilities are like a whole different battlefield almost.
It's like a hidden arsenal, isn't it? And if China's doing this, it makes you wonder, are other countries doing the same thing?
That's the key point. The U.S. National Vulnerability Database, for instance, it's open, accessible. It's about working together, sharing information globally.
Yeah, trying to improve security for everyone.
Right. So it's a much more collaborative approach. Very different from what we see in China.
Yeah, totally different. China's not very transparent about their intentions or how they use this vulnerability data, are they?
Not really, no. And that lack of transparency, combined with their history of cyber espionage, well, it makes people nervous.
It's hard to just take them at their word.
Exactly. It's hard to believe that they're just doing all this for purely defensive reasons.
So where does all this leave us? What can people, companies, do to protect themselves in this environment?
Well, I think the first step is awareness. Understanding that vulnerabilities can be weapons used by governments changes the game.
It's not just hackers in their basements anymore.
Right. This is about national interests, gaining an advantage. It can even lead to cyber warfare.
So what can we do? What are some practical steps?
The basics are more crucial than ever. Strong passwords, using multi-factor authentication everywhere you can, keeping software updated, that's your first line of defense.
Okay, the essentials. But what about the products and services we're using? Does this change how we should think about them?
Absolutely. Supply chain security, that's what you have to think about. If a company might be forced to share vulnerabilities with the Chinese government, using their products introduces risk.
So we need to know where our technology comes from. Be more careful with what we choose.
Exactly. And don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify your tech. Don't rely on products from a single country or vendor. Spread the risk, like a diversified investment portfolio.
That's a good analogy. And of course, staying informed about all this is important. Things are changing all the time.
Knowledge is power, right? And there are some big ethical questions here too, like, is it ever right for a government to collect vulnerabilities, maybe even exploit them, even if they say it's for national security?
It's a complicated question.
It is. Some might say all's fair in cyber warfare. But others argue that exploiting vulnerabilities weakens the internet for everyone, makes us all less safe.
It's a tough call. And then there's the issue of trust. Can we trust any government or company to handle this information the right way?
That's the heart of the issue, isn't it?
If they were transparent about their processes and what they plan to do with the information, that would help.
Transparency builds trust.
But the world of intelligence and national security, transparency isn't always their top priority, is it?
Not exactly, no. It's a constant struggle, balancing security and transparency, national interests, and global cooperation.
It's messy. So we talked about the RMSV and the CNNVD, but what about the bigger picture? What about China's overall cybersecurity strategy and how that fits with their global ambitions?
That's important to consider.
Let's connect the dots. What's the end goal here?
China's been very vocal about their ambitions to become a global leader in technology. They've invested massively in artificial intelligence, 5G, quantum computing, all the cutting-edge stuff.
They want to be at the forefront of the tech revolution, and cybersecurity plays a key role in that, right?
Absolutely. They see it as both a shield and a sword, essentially. It's a matter of defense and a potential weapon.
So part of their plan for global dominance involves dominating cyberspace?
I think it's a key component. If they can control vulnerabilities, they can weaken their adversaries, protect their own systems, and gain a strategic advantage.
It's all starting to make sense now. The laws, the databases, the talent development, they're building a comprehensive cyber ecosystem.
Exactly. And we need to view their actions through that lens. What they're doing in cyberspace isn't random. It's all part of a bigger strategy to advance their interests on the world stage.
So let's get specific. How does this translate into real-world actions? How are they using these capabilities to achieve their goals?
Well, consider the issue of intellectual property theft, for example. China's been accused of using cyber espionage to steal trade secrets and technology from foreign companies and governments.
Yeah, that's been a major point of tension internationally.
It has. It allows them to essentially leapfrog ahead in terms of technological development, but it undermines fair competition and erodes trust. It's a form of economic warfare.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of censorship and control within China's own borders. They use their cyber capabilities to restrict access to information and suppress dissent.
The Great Firewall is the most obvious example, but they're also exporting those censorship technologies to other countries.
Helping authoritarian regimes tighten their grip on power. It's like they're spreading their model of cyber control.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the potential for China to use these capabilities more aggressively. Think disruptive or destructive cyber attacks against their adversaries. That's a very real concern.
That's where things get really scary.
It is a possibility we can't ignore. The lines between espionage, sabotage, and actual warfare are becoming increasingly blurred in cyberspace.
Okay, so given all of that, what can the rest of the world do to counter China's growing cyber power? Is it a losing battle?
It's a challenge, no doubt, but there are things we can do. Investing in our own cyber defenses is crucial. That means strengthening critical infrastructure, developing a skilled cybersecurity workforce, and fostering innovation in cybersecurity technology. We can't afford to fall behind.
We need to be proactive.
Absolutely. We also need to work together with our allies to share information, coordinate our defenses, and present a united front.
Strength in numbers.
Right. And we need to hold China accountable for their actions, call out their cyber espionage, human rights abuses, and their attempts to undermine the international order. We have to set clear boundaries and consequences.
But can we really expect them to change their behavior?
That's the tough question. China's shown a willingness to talk about cybersecurity, but their actions often contradict their words. We need to be realistic about their intentions and not be naive.
This is a fluid situation. We need to be vigilant and engage strategically to stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. We can't be complacent. The stakes are too high.
This has been an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that cybersecurity isn't just a technical issue anymore. It's a fundamental aspect of national security and international relations, and its importance will only continue to grow in the years to come.
As technology advances, the cyber domain will only become a more contested battleground.
So what's next? What are some of the key trends and developments we should be watching for?
I think we'll continue to see a blurring of the lines between peacetime and wartime in cyberspace. Espionage, sabotage, and disinformation campaigns are going to become increasingly common.
It's like we're in a state of perpetual low-level cyber conflict.
Exactly. And as artificial intelligence and automation get more sophisticated, the scale and complexity of cyber attacks will increase. This could even lead to a full-blown cyber arms race. We also need to consider the potential impact of emerging technologies like quantum computing.
Quantum computing.
Yeah, quantum computers have the potential to break the encryption we rely on to protect our data. It would be a game changer.
It would indeed.
We need to start preparing for a post-quantum world now by developing new encryption algorithms and security protocols.
It's a lot to consider. Cybersecurity isn't a static field. It's constantly evolving, so we need to adapt and innovate to stay ahead of the threats.
We need to be proactive, not reactive.
Right.
Strategic in our thinking, not just tactical.
Couldn't agree more. And this is a call to action for everyone, not just governments and cybersecurity professionals. We all have a role to play in securing our digital future.
Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. We need to stay informed, be vigilant, and be engaged. I think this deep dive has provided a valuable look into the complexities of cybersecurity and geopolitics. It's a wake-up call, that's for sure.
It is. We can't afford to be passive observers. The future of the internet is something we all have a hand in shaping. It's a lot to take in, honestly. Makes you feel kind of helpless. Where do we even begin with a problem this big?
It is overwhelming. But we can take action. As individuals, sure, we've talked about practical steps, but collective action, that's where the real power lies.
What do you mean by collective action when it comes to something like this?
We can demand more transparency from our governments, from the companies we support. Ask them tough questions about their cybersecurity, how they collect data, who they work with, especially foreign entities,
So, use our voices.
and our wallets. Exactly. We can choose to support organizations fighting for better security, raising awareness, holding bad actors accountable.
There's power in numbers. If enough people speak up, demand change, it can actually happen.
It can. And this isn't just about protecting ourselves, it's about our values.
Right.
What kind of internet do we want? One with censorship, surveillance, and distrust everywhere?
Yeah.
Or something open, secure, where we can actually trust each other?
Those are big questions, not easy answers. This deep dive, it's given us a lot to think about and a lot to do.
It's a wake-up call, no doubt.
It is. We can't afford to just sit back and watch this happen.
We all have a role in shaping the future of the internet. It's on us.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive and sharing your insights on this. It's been really valuable.
It's been my pleasure. These are important conversations to have.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of cybersecurity and geopolitics. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the challenges we're facing and why it's so important to be proactive.
Knowledge is power. Remember that. The more we know about the threats, the better we can protect ourselves and work towards a more secure future.
Absolutely. And on that note, one last thing for you to think about as we wrap up. What role do you see yourself playing in shaping what the internet becomes? It's something to think about seriously and then take action. Until next time, everyone, stay safe online and stay engaged.